Good evening. Welcome to the Buddy Martin Show. It's a Wednesday night. If all goes well, we should be having Ali Peek Wilbur, Chris Doering, and David Moulton tonight to discuss the vagaries of sports, most specifically the SEC and most specifically the Gators. Much to talk about. Playoff schedule announced for the 12-game playoff. Talk about that later on, along with Ali, along with Chris, and along with David Moulton. Here at the Buddy Martin Show. Tell your friends and neighbors. We are on the air. Come listen and watch.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ? I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Buddy Martin. Tonight, we have a lot of things to talk about. Lots of softball, postmortems, also baseball. Gators are alive, playing up in Clemson. And this, just across my desk, something that it just looks funny to see it for the first time. If I can pull it down here, we'll see. We'll take a look at it. We've got the playoff schedule. Yeah, we've got a schedule. Let me go get Ali Peek Wilbur here real fast and get her to come in and check in. This is Ali Peek Wilbur. She joins us on the program every Wednesday when she can make it. She did tonight. Ali, good evening to you. How you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm all right. I was taking a look at the schedule for the first time ever of the college football playoffs. I just came across my desk, and
Okay.
you realize it's here. You know, it's
Yeah,
here.
it is this season. It's happening.
Look at that right there. That's it. This whole thing we talked about. There it is right there. Starts on the 20th. And here
Yeah.
we go. And there's the sights of it and it's real. Now that we have that, however, I'm a little concerned of what we got. What have we done? We might be sorry we got it. I don't know. But there's what it looks like. We wanted 12 teams. We got 12 teams. And I, as one who pushed for this for so many years to get it, I'm hoping it doesn't blow up in our face. Anyway, let's don't take the negative approach. Let's take the positive approach. Ali, good to see you again. I hope you're well.
I'm doing well, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Ali. And someone told me, Freddie Weeby told me, well, she's my favorite one on the show. So you got fans everywhere. So Freddie's a good one to have. So tonight on the show, I put my tease out so we do to prompt our people to watch and listen as they're doing so great lately. And I said, has the sudden popularity of women's sports impacted the overall programs at some schools? If so, how? We asked Ali Peek Wilbur, Chris Doring, and David Moulton tonight on the Buddy Martin Show. And today on Chris Doring's show, on XM Sirius SEC show, we talked about that. Chris had a few things to discuss, and I know we talked about it some last week. Everything
Yeah.
from Caitlin Clark and down to this remarkable performance by the Florida Gator softball team. I don't know, and Chris said this on the morning show, and I'm not going to steal the thunder. I don't know the last time we've had back-to-back days like that, for Gator fans to be all buzzed and excited, and
Yeah.
besides, especially when it wasn't football. Did you get that sense?
I mean, I put a tweet out when it was on Monday that said, like, can anybody remember a more fun Monday?
Yeah.
In recent history. I mean, I can't. And that was, I felt like, honestly, like I text my dad. I felt like I was channeling my grandfather because he
Yeah.
was the biggest women's softball fan. And
Oh,
I'm
was he
talking
really? Scotty
25
was.
years before Scotty was a huge women's
Wow.
softball.
No kidding.
Anytime he could get a game on TV, he was watching it. He was all in all the time. And so I know that he was smiling with his picture-in-picture of softball and baseball at the same time. It was a fun day to be a Gator. It was, I mean, gutsy performances by both teams.
Mhm.
Oklahoma is the Goliath of women's softball
Yeah.
right now. And so to, be able to take Goliath down in that game, and I mean, they almost did it twice,
Yeah.
was remarkable and so fun. And this baseball team, if these bats stay hot, this is a team that many thought had a chance to make a run when we talked about it in the preseason. It's an incredibly talented team. I think that they maybe underperformed a lot of the regular season, but they continue to hit their stride. Look out, because talent-wise, they can compete with anybody.
I have two thoughts which I want to try to extrapolate tonight. Maybe you could help me before you have to go. I know you have some things you have to do tonight to prepare for tomorrow. And one of them is I feel strong. I'm a person, I go by feeling. You do this a
Mhm.
lot too. We talk about the Gators and talk about the vagaries of it and who gets signed and who gets whatever. And I have two thoughts. I feel like I was drawn to this women's softball team even more than the baseball team. I mean,
Yeah,
I was watching it, but I mean, the women's was so powerful,
yeah.
and it just was almost addictive, to watch it. And I wonder, I thought about that, and I thought about what had happened with Caitlin Clark,
Mhm.
how she busted out and became a huge eyeball magnet because getting eyeballs is the name of the game in TV, as we know. You were in TV for a while, and Caitlin Clark's amazing what she's done. And I've watched others around me, particularly my wife, Dawn, who she really got enamored of this woman, and I did too. So that was one thing. Then the second thing was I just fell in love with Skylar Wallace.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, I wish I'd have known her or watched her play. The way she played, the heart she played, and an amazing clip. I don't know if you saw it or not after the game, post game. I can't play it on my for some reason, but it's talking about the greatest thing I ever did was become a Florida Gator. Now that will ring your bell.
Heck yeah, I retweeted that interview. I thought that was so powerful. She was so choked up. And I don't know if you saw the clips, but that team stayed inside autographs for a long time after that game for all the kids that are there. And you're talking about a game that was heartbreaking. They were so close to the
Yeah,
national championship. If there was a time to, go in the locker room because you were upset, that would have been it. But they didn't
yeah,
do that. And I watched that, even that team when they were chanting "It's great to be a Florida Gator" after the game with
yeah.
the group of fans that made the trip out there to College Station, like that. Just the whole thing was incredibly moving to me. I think those girls are in it for the right reason. I think part of what makes women's sports so popular at this exact moment has to do with NIL. I think that the the revenue generating sports, the football and the basketball, the egos have gotten so big on some of the players. And I'm not saying at Florida, I'm saying just in general, that
Mhm.
it makes them less relatable.
Yeah.
But none of the girls that play college athletics are playing it for the paycheck. Now, that doesn't mean that some of them aren't using NIL to their advantage. We've seen what Leanne Wong has created. We've watched these women be able to translate that into money, but they're playing for these colleges because they want to, because they care about the name on the front of the jersey more than they care about the name on the back of the jersey. And I think that that's maybe a piece of why women's athletics is so popular at this moment, because I don't know that we're seeing that in men's sports. I think the almighty dollar is carrying a lot of men's athletics right now.
100%. You just nailed it. And there is, I'll ask Chris tonight and also David, if you detect a little bit of sometimes a disconnect with
Mhm.
a football or basketball program that's in their own cocoon,
Mhm.
they're worried about their own and their room, the quarterback room, and this room and that room, and
Yep.
talking about what they believe. And then that Josh Pate interview, I think that's one thing that came up when Billy was asking about that, and he was asking Billy the perception they have. Well, when
Mhm.
you circle the wagons, don't let anybody in your cocoon. what kind of what are you going to have?
Right.
One-dimensional thinking, believing in what you say you are, and that's
Mhm.
great. But outside is the real world. What
Yeah.
I'm seeing, I think now, I'm not a philosopher. I don't even play one on TV. And the bottom line is that this is resonating with the fan base, as you said, in a way that people will talk about NIL deals. I mean, right now, people in Florida are throwing up at the idea that high schools are going to have NIL deals. They passed that law. Now, you get high school coaches I know are just freaking out. Okay, whatever that is, I'm not against players getting paid or whatever. I don't think any of us is. But you nailed it when you talk about a team.
Mhm.
All right, a team is what Florida had in softball, to a
Yeah.
lesser extent in baseball, but certainly in softball. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a cliche to say it. Those girls play for each other. I
Absolutely.
mean, I would play for Skylar Wallace in a heartbeat. I
Mhm.
mean, she is amazing, and they give absolutely everything they have and leave it on the field.
Yeah.
And what they make you want to do is invest emotionally and financially in them. And that's
Yes.
the way to get the NIL deals, And instead of getting the Lamborghini, you know. Anyway, that's my thought about it. I'm glad you agree with that.
Yeah. Well, and we saw this a couple of years ago. Really, truly, at the dawn of NIL with Trinity Thomas for Florida with gymnastics. A couple of years ago we took the girls up and we did a tour before a
Yeah.
meet, and Lee Turner showed us around, and she's the matriarch of Florida gymnastics, and she was talking about the renovations that were going to come for this upcoming season that just happened, and she was like, we are sold out because of Trinity, because there are girls like yours that want to be like her. And, she used her name, image, and likeness in the right way. She did profit off of it, but she was so likable. She cared about being a Gator, and she turned an entire generation of little girls onto Florida Gator gymnastics. Those meets sell out every year. I'm waiting to see, did we have enough points to qualify for season tickets? We put our deposit down, but we'll see, because they go in donation order or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they added more seats this past year to meets because they needed them, and then they sold them out again. And that's something we haven't seen before. But that she used name, image, and likeness the right way.
Yeah, exactly. All right, little news I want you to respond to before we get Chris Sturgeon on there. Florida, of course, has the toughest schedule according to ESPN's FPI. I don't understand this. It said, although the Gators are a preseason top 20 team, ESPN's projection to finish at 500, but they also expect them projected to be in the top 20. I don't know. I mean, they're going to go 5-5 and be the top 25. I don't know. I don't get that. But anyway, bottom line is that there's news today in recruiting. We talk about the baseball thing in a minute. Florida signed a transfer portal player from Jacksonville. I believe his name is Nadu, I believe, from JU. They like him a lot. And have you been keeping up with the quarterback they got a commitment from?
Yeah.
Something wacky going on there. He's a four-star quarterback, Will Griffin.
Yeah.
He's from Tampa Jesuit, but
Yep.
now I read today, I'll get this, he fell 46 spots in the rank. I don't understand
I mean,
this.
it always blows my mind when kids drop in rankings when football's not being played.
Mhm.
And honestly, camps haven't even really started for the summer yet. So they base the majority of their final ranking on their senior season. Will still has his junior season to go, and then he will have his senior season.
Good point,
So
yeah.
he has so much time. So Will is from Jesuit, which my family is a big Jesuit family. His
Okay.
quarterback coach is Jeff Carlson, who lives 5 houses down from me. He is
Okay.
a Bucks quarterback. He did broadcasting with me with Spectrum for years. I was sidelined. He was in the booth. He has coached Will since he was 6 years old. And he actually told me Will has a brother that's a couple years younger that's going to be even more talented than Will, which is crazy. But he said Will grew up wanting to be a Gator. So, this is kind of a dream come true for him. But guys, we are talking about a 16-year-old kid. He's got 2 full seasons of high school football left to be played. He's huge for his age. He's incredibly talented, comes from a really good family, wants to be a Gator. This is a good pickup, and I wouldn't worry about his ranking. It'll continue to improve.
Gotcha. I don't worry about it anyway. On another front, Gators active in the portal on several fronts. Apparently, Texas Tech's in through the Landon Stripling. I don't know much about it. Is committing to Florida. It was a highly touted prospect out of Georgia last year, and a full draft eligible sophomore headed to Gainesville. So Sully's not wasting any time, is he?
No, definitely not. I mean, he had people in town last weekend, which was kind of perfect. They literally flew in, had a recruiting trip, turn around. They're getting ready to go back to Clemson, but strike while the iron is hot. And that is right this exact moment.
Exactly. I want to go back to baseball and something that I think is really important. And Sully said this, I guess, last week. I'd never heard it before. Maybe he said it. He said, in order to have a chance to win in the postseason, especially when you get to the series, level, you have to have people that show up that you really weren't expecting. Those players that you didn't expect them to play. And Florida has had a couple of those big time. One of them was the MVP of those regions. He wound up being the MVP of the whole series. He didn't even play 8 games ago. And there's a guy, talk about Cinderella stories as an individual. Ashton Wilson was the MVP of the regional. Remarkable. And the second was Brandon Neely. What a performance, I'm telling you. Amazing.
Performance. Performance. Incredible.
Yeah, it is, right.
This baseball team is really fun to watch. We watched them, and obviously they lost key pieces of it last year, but we watched them make their deep run last year. They were so incredibly close. They were so incredibly talented. They were coming back to attempt a run at the national title, and the season didn't really go as they expected. But like I said earlier, they have the talent. But yeah, I think part of what makes the way that the baseball postseason plays out so special is that you play so many games that you really do have to have unexpected people show up, because you got take a guy like Jack Caglione. They're going to walk him every chance they can. They're doing everything in their power to limit his effect. But what does that do? It opens up an opportunity for somebody else, because if you're thinking Cags is going to always get walked to first base, there's opportunities later on for somebody else to hit him home, to become a hero. They're just the strategy that goes into blocking the guys about provides opportunities for guys you don't. It is a fun postseason.
Let's bring this guy into the discussion right here. We have us on his show this morning, Chris Doering, who has all kinds of shows. Enjoyed it very much this morning. We had this discussion partially. Let's pick it up with Ali. Say good evening to Ali. Chris.
Hey, Ali, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Good to be on with you guys. Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it, man? I think, baseball in Gainesville has grown significantly with the construction of Florida Ballpark a couple years ago, man. No worse place in Gainesville this time of year than back at the old McKeithen Stadium. I love McKeithen Stadium, but it was hot as hell. But the new ballpark, having it right there with the softball field, has created quite the desire to get out and be a part of that. And certainly what they did last year created a high bar for this year, and they didn't meet it, as you kind of said, Ali. But all it is, just like poker, man, chipping a chair and you get a chance. Ole Miss did it a couple years ago. It'd be amazing to see Florida go on a run like that. And we've been waiting for these young pitchers to kind of grow up, and so it's been fun to see those guys get an opportunity. I wondered out loud on my show the other day, is it because these guys got experience and they're getting older and throughout the year and they got more confidence, or is it they finally step outside of the conference against a lineup that's not murderer's row like you have to play in this league, and you're able to have a little bit better success against some of these teams?
Maybe a combination of both, because it's true. think about how many SEC teams. What do we have? 5 going to super regionals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, LSU blew their chance, but yeah, 5 of the teams remain.
I mean, it's astounding. For a conference that's known for football, they sure as hell are incredibly talented at baseball. But I do think the pitching growing up has been a big part of this success as well. And the bats getting hot at the right time, obviously, is a factor.
No doubt. I'm trying to find a way to get to Clemson this weekend, man. I don't know if you guys are going, but would
Mm.
love to go catch at least 1 or 2 up there.
Yeah, that's the schedule on Saturday and Sunday, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fox
Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yep.
And if they need them, Monday.
Yep. So I got Clemson friends that have been trying to talk trash to me, and I said, yeah, that's all great and all, but there's not a bigger choker in the postseason than Clemson baseball, right? And you can't literally change a tiger's stripes. So hopefully they continue that trend.
For sure. We had a conversation on your show, which I enjoyed very much, the
Yeah, thanks for
SEC series, and which I thought was interesting since your co-host is female, LSU, and we talked about the impact of women's sports overall. And Alan and I touched upon it earlier that, and I quoted your comment on the show, where and Alan echoed the same. Once there been 2 days in a row back to back like we had last weekend that were not football for Gator fans that people got buzzed about, which I think they really did. I think the 3 of us felt it in a different way than many do. And it was just remarkable. You almost became transfixed on softball and maybe a little baseball too. You flick back and forth. Like I said, it's like playing ping pong, trying to find the weather delays. They move the channels. Where'd they go? You're looking on the ESPN, this ESPN, that. You have 9 different channels trying to find these games. It's nerve wracking just doing that. But it was really an unbelievable experience. I think we all had some kind of special feeling about that. And I'd like you to explain yours, Chris, and you, Ali, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think winning attracts interest, right? And nobody loves winning like Florida fans do. And it's we've suffered a little bit in football, and so looking for other outlets to be able to celebrate is important. But I go back to Tim Walton, man. Tim Walton had probably one of his most disappointing seasons last year. I had a chance to talk to him on our show a couple weeks ago, and I give him a lot of credit, man. He knew what he needed to change, went out and added some pieces, whether we're talking about Rothrock as a freshman or some of the acquisitions to the portal, put together a team that has a good mix, a lot of young folks on that team that are going to have a chance to come back and experience or benefit from the experience this year. But, changing the style of play a little bit and understanding that you have to evolve to be able to survive. So it's been fun to watch. And I mentioned on the show, buddy, when you were on this morning, the interest in women's sports. I don't think it's ever been as high, or particularly in college athletics. But you can say it's because of the big names like Caitlin Clark. You say it's because of the push to televise more of those games. But honestly, I think you're talking about more highly skilled players. I never used to like watching women's basketball because the gap between what men's basketball and women's basketball looked like was so different. But now you've seen the skill level improve significantly, and I think it makes it much more compelling to watch. Looking at some of the fielding plays that were made out in Oklahoma City and the softball, it makes it compelling to watch. I've always been a huge volleyball. Probably my favorite women's sport is volleyball, just because it's played at such a high level. But I think the interest is there's no pity involved. I think it's just a matter of, hey, these females are really good at what they do, and we want to tune in and watch people play at a high level, whatever they're doing.
Yeah, Skylar Wallace going head to head with that woman who was 50 pounds heavier. Her at second base was remarkable. I thought she was dead, for crying out loud. She got hit so hard. But anyway, all right, Allie, you want to repeat what you said. There's something about team building, too, that women tend to do it better, that they have a bond. And that is resonating with a lot of fans out there that I think a lot of other people who are in the game don't quite get it, especially, isn't it, Allie?
I just think that they're more relatable at the moment. I think our revenue generating sports, so many of our top athletes are so concerned with the amount of money that they're bringing in that there's a lot of me on teams, a lot of and you don't see that as much in women's sports, and they aren't getting paid, And now I know that their NIL deals on the side and their marketability on Instagram and Twitter and things like that are actually probably higher than the men, but the money that they're getting to come to a university is not in any way the same. And I think that it makes it easier to build teams. It's got to be incredibly hard as a college coach right now to build a team, to build a program with the way that NIL is. And I don't think that that's infiltrated women's sports in exactly the same way. I do also think for women's softball, especially the way that the postseason works and the multiple games and they're long and drawn out, they're with these weather delays and such, we've gotten to tell a lot of amazing stories. The broadcast crew does such a great job making us want to root for these women. And there's a lot of really compelling storylines with the transfer portal and teams that players are playing their former team. There's, kids that played together the year before that are now opponents. It's all of that is a level of intrigue too, that is maybe a positive of the transfer portal. But I just, these teams are compelling. They're relatable to the average fan. And I think that some of us are looking for that. Some of us, like, Chris, I grew up when you were playing, and then when Warfel was playing, and I can remember being a little kid and hearing these stories over and over on the broadcast, and then wanting to root for that player because of the struggles that they went to get to the place that they are. I knew Danny Warfel's dad was a preacher because they talked about that all the time, and how Spurrier's dad was. And, we're missing that part a little bit in college athletics right now, but I think you're still getting it from the women's side.
You make a lot of great points there, Ali, and I think you used the phrase building a program. I think the days of building a program are over with. What you're trying to do is build a team for one season. When you're talking about college football, it's about having the right pieces at the right time and adding some through the portal and retaining guys on the roster. There's a lot of maintenance. And, you look at Ole Miss, they did a great job last year of bringing a lot of guys in the transfer portal. It worked, but I don't know if you can always have that same chemistry with so many guys that don't know each other. So I think it's going to be very hit or miss from season to season. I think there's something attractive, as you talked about, Ali, as it relates to a team that really loves one another and has great chemistry. I didn't know a lot. A lot of us probably down here didn't know a lot about Michigan's team this year. But when I went out to the Rose Bowl to cover them and hearing them talk about what they had gone through this year and talking about their love for one another, it really was kind of interesting because it played out in that second half. They did absolutely nothing against Alabama until the final drive. They were able to put together one drive. They never gave up on each other and figured out a way to win that game in overtime. Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for teams that are special, that have that chemistry, buddy. I felt it. There were times at Florida in the off-season conditioning program where you felt like you had something a little special going. Heading into that 95 season, the leadership we had, you could feel people falling in line. You could feel that there were guys hanging out with each other and loving one another. And, unfortunately, I think the Michigans in this modern era of transfer portal NIL stuff, I don't know that those are going to be as frequent as they used to be.
I mean, do you think Tim Tebow's promise speech after the Ole Miss game has the same effect in the transfer portal era? Because I feel like we could probably argue it wouldn't, right? I mean, that worked because they loved each other and they were playing for each other. Does that work today? I don't know.
The speech came from the guy growing up as a lifelong Gator fan, right? And how many guys have a tie to the school that they end up going to now? Most of the guys want to know, all right, how much am I getting paid? Not, hey, what can I study here? What can I do with my opportunity outside of football? For me, it meant way more to play for Florida than it ever would have to have gotten paid a single dollar. And so you have to have guys like that have some tie to the history of the school, to the tradition, and understand what it means to be, in our case, a Florida Gator, which is a very, very special honor.
Well, you love the game so much you play for nothing. And by the way, you did, Chris. You were a walk-on. That's the amazing part about it. Those are stories that need to be resurrected. Let's take it evening to David Moulton. I know Ali's got to go here in a second. I don't know. This certainly doesn't measure up as the promise. but it sure resonated with me. I wish I could have gotten it online. I've only got it on my phone. I thought what Skylar Wallace said in their post-game press conference was very impactful. Let's see if I can play it. If I can, get your reaction to it, all right? This is going to work here. All right, here we go. Well,
I don't really have words to put that into. Coach Vaughn not
shoot. Man, I was trying one more time.
me one time, but twice. And to have that opportunity and to come to the University of Florida and not only develop as an athlete, but more as a person, and him just trusting in me and giving me every opportunity. I mean, the resources, and the time, the dedication that the whole staff puts into us is unreal. It's unmatched, honestly. You don't get what you get here.
All right. No, there's one line I want to get in there. It's really important if I can get it, where she says, "Yeah, this is not working very good." Anyway, she said the greatest thing I ever did was become a Florida Gator, and it kind of gives you chills.
I don't really have words
Yeah.
to put that into.
Ali, you heard it. I'm not sure you did, David, and maybe you did, Chris. If you haven't, I recommend you go to YouTube and hear that bite, because it says, in essence, at that moment, what it is all about for these athletes like her, and the fact that she is such a paragon of whatever for women's sports and all of sports right now. The passion she's showing, the love she's showing, is so tender and powerful. It really touched me. Ali, did you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. I retweeted that clip, and I think there's so many of us that the greatest decision we made was becoming a Gator, and we feel that, and so we relate to that. But that is hard to find in college athletics at the moment, and so it's refreshing to hear somebody that cares about the logo on the front of the jersey.
Chris,
I'll say this, buddy. Like, listening to that reminded me of the post game after the Nebraska loss in the national championship. I think it's a combination of disappointment and being so close and yet not getting there and winning it all. But it's also the finality. And I think in life, especially when we're young, you think things are going to last forever. And that's one of the things that I go back when I talk to Florida's team or other players is like, enjoy it. I know you may be a freshman. I know that it seems like 4 years is way down the road, but it goes by like that, and it really is the most special time of your life. And so I can relate significantly with what she said, and more so how she felt, because once you play that last game, you'll always be a Gator, but you'll never have the chance to put that uniform on and do those things that so many other people dream of getting the chance to do.
David's probably about to puke right now and all those Gator love.
No, in fact, I would like to, and I don't know if you guys talked about it last week, but the Division III Birmingham Southern baseball team.
Yeah.
Did you hear when they finally got eliminated that the NCAA provides transportation to NCAA tournaments to and from, and they, realizing that this was the end, they said no to the NCAA's, planes, and they said, "Can we take a bus trip home?" And they took a 13-hour bus trip home because they wanted that one last moment together.
That's great.
Because not obviously the school was closing, but also they were all going to go their separate ways. And, Chris, you had that in 95. I think we've all had that moment, whether it's, high school graduation, college graduation, the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team, their last moment together was at the White House. And they all realized as they were looking at one another, wow, we are never going to be in the same room again.
You're right. And it is the finality of it, Chris, and your good point, David. And I remember getting on the bus back when the media wasn't, bounced around by the gendarmes after the Nebraska loss, the annihilation that night, and getting on the team bus and seeing Coach Spurrier and Jerry. And I walked up to them, and all I could say was, "I'm so sorry." Of course, Coach Spurrier didn't want any pity, but he was just absolutely devastated by that, as you were and your teammate. And to turn around and to win a national championship out of that deal, what a moment, Chris, for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you have to fail in order to succeed, and that was kind of the theme of what we did, during the beginning of that Spurrier run, the beginning of the '90s. So many failures. Whether you're talking about their first appearance in the SEC championship game in '92 and losing on the Antonio Langham interception, we went on to win 4 in a row after that. Or you're talking about the trip to the Sugar Bowl for the first time, where Jerome Bettis ran all over us, and then we figured out how to handle New Orleans and how to handle that environment. We went out and clobbered West Virginia the next year, or even the national championship game. You get there, you figure out maybe what you did wrong, and you come back and correct it the next year. So I was certainly disappointed to not have had the chance to come back and redo it with all my teammates the next year, but was really proud of what they used in terms of a failure to learn, to grow, and to kind of catapult into that next championship run.
I'm going to let David comment. Go ahead, Allie.
I was going to say Urban's teams did that too. You think about losing to South Carolina in 2005. All they have to do is beat that Gamecock team, and they are going to an SEC championship game, and they lost. But I remember Eric coming back, and he sent a text message that was like, "I don't want to see anybody," and that includes you. And I'm pretty sure he sat, in the stadium. Meanwhile, we had a party set up because we were thinking we were going to be celebrating this. But it made them work harder, and they came back and they made it to the SEC and the national championship the next year. But all of those great teams have a failure you can point to that they used as motivation to get better.
David, have we lost that ability to translate that kind of emotion and to connect with fan base? Or is that days over with or what?
No, I don't think. I mean, Allie, I thought was very eloquent right before you brought me on, talking about maybe it's some of the Olympic sports, maybe it's some of the women's sports that really reconnects us to what it is it felt like. And when I was listening to Allie, I was also thinking about Chris, and I don't know if you guys have commented, they're trying to outlaw the walk-on.
Yeah. That's what I want to hear out of Chris.
Really, seriously, with all the money that's out there, really, this one's a tough one, I think, for those of us. Really, now the football programs are going to have to start, quote unquote, pinching pennies. Okay. And I know that, Pat Forty and others have done a thing this week in terms of how big rosters are and normally how many people play in a game. And you're right. Oftentimes, half the guys standing on the sidelines are not playing in the games. But college is about more than playing time. College is where we go and, the girls become women and boys become men, and it's about social and it's about education. And I mean, are we really going to take walk-ons away from Division I college athletics? I mean, what are we doing? What are we threatening to lose here?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask Allie. She's got to go, I know, because she has to go out of town. And let me get Chris respond. Chris, will you respond to David? Allie, I'll say good night to you. Let you go. I'd love to keep you, but I know you got a big thing to go to tomorrow. So thank you so much for being on the program. All right.
And walk-ons forever.
Okay.
Right.
There you go. There's a T-shirt.
I think I mentioned it to you this morning, buddy, on my show, but I had a chance to be at Destin last week for the SEC spring meetings, and more questions than answers coming out of that couple-day meeting there. I said to Commissioner Sankey, I said, I have a personal request. I need you to protect walk-ons with all the changes that are taking place. It's obviously one that's very close to home with me and the path that I took. So I'm very nervous for a couple reasons. One, people like me that maybe were overlooked or get better at later portions of their lives are not going to have that same opportunity. People that are passionate about following their dreams and believing in themselves or may not be able to have that opportunity. But walk-ons are a vital part of the fabric of college football, especially now in the SEC. You look at Texas A&M. The 12th man is essentially celebrating the normal student population that comes out and helps on special teams. I mean, the walk-ons, Stetson Bennett wins 2 national championships 2 years ago. So these players are, even if you never touch the field, I have so many friends that were walk-ons that every day showed up to give a look on offensive or defensive scout team. They're going through every off-season workout. And I think one of the things that you go and look, as David said, people become men from going to college, and I guarantee you people become men going through being a part of a football team. If you look at a lot of businesses, they want to hire walk-ons. They want to hire college athletes, but they want to hire walk-ons because of the perseverance that it takes, the dedication, the commitment. All of those things are great characteristics that you have to develop and nurture as you're going through the process of being a walk-on, whether you play a single down ever or not.
Michigan State walk-on Matt Ishbia is worth billions and owns the Phoenix Suns. And he was a walk-on all 4 years at Michigan State. And Chris, with the reality of today, also, I mean, not only were you a walk-on, but today's high school athletes are being, under-recruited more than ever before because the college coaches don't want to waste their time developing a 17 or an 18-year-old. They want to get a 20, 21-year-old who's physically more developed, who's got a couple years of experience. There are major programs that are barely recruiting high school kids anymore. So the only chance for a Chris Doering from Gainesville High to play for the local team, I mean, more so than ever before, is the walk-on, because high school kids are flat out not being recruited.
Yeah, and I talk about it all the time, David. I'm actually grateful that I didn't get a scholarship offer from anywhere else. Had I gotten one from Wake Forest or something like that, maybe I end up going to play that route. People have said, well, walk-ons, maybe those guys that would typically walk on at the Division I level will be, dispersed and they'll go play Division II or FCS football or whatever, and then make their way as they get better and can go through the transfer portal. But I never would have worked as hard. I never would have been as dedicated had it not been following the dream of playing for the University of Florida, my childhood team. And I don't understand why we would ever deny a kid an opportunity to do something they're passionate about. For those of you that have kids that are my age, that have kids that are my kids' age, you went through a process where finding something that I'm passionate about is very hard to do. And those kids that want to be able to follow a dream that they may have had, they do not need to be deterred from doing that.
I mean, we're losing a lot in college athletics going forward, but are we really going to eliminate Rudy?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious though. I know it's a good line and all that, but I mean, come on now, really? With all that is possible, why are we doing this? I'm sorry, I don't know what bothers me more, the thought of eliminating walk-ons or the thought of expanding the NCAA basketball tournament. But it's walk-ons close. It really is. And unfortunately, the SEC is banging the drum and leading the way on both. They are. It's wrong.
I did not get a positive feeling from
right.
the answer that Commissioner Sankey gave.
No.
I don't know the logic behind it. It's
money. It's cutting costs, and the coaches are against it. This is very interesting. We think the coaches are so powerful. This is very much the suits against the coaches, and it'll be fascinating to see who wins this, because there's not a single coach, Chris, and you know it. There's not a single coach that is for this. This is all ADs, presidents, and commissioners.
Yeah,
because it's all about money.
It's funny, David, that we were just talking about maybe Olympic sports and maybe the women's sports are more relatable these days. Well, with the budget cuts are coming, they very well may eliminate a lot of those sports because they don't produce revenue. And in fact, they're draining a lot of the money that football makes. So all of the things that we're talking about, we love as it relates to college athletics, are on the verge of being lost because of this seismic shift that we're going through right now.
Listen, Trev Alberts is right. Okay, college athletics does not have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem. College athletic departments are a lot like Congress. Okay, revenue's not the problem. Spending money is the problem.
Oh, you mean like having 75, 80 coaches, you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would walk up to Billy Napier and say, listen, tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. Before we eliminate the walk-ons, Pick out about 15 guys in golf shirts, and you need to tell them they got to do something else. We'll keep them for the rest of the year, but just let them know going to have to be making some changes. I mean, don't you think there are a few too many people in golf shirts?
Yeah, it's really gotten to be. Listen, it's the same people who are
And
kind
this
of
is
running.
not just a Billy Napier thing. I mean,
It's the same
I don't
people
know
who are
about you.
trying to screw up the WNBA and run off Caitlin Clark and give her a suspender. Because I mean, will you imagine that?
I mean, for a couple years, I used to get the Alabama football Christmas card because I was associated with the SEC on CBS. And every year I used to count how many guys were in the golf shirts. All right. And it kept growing every year. More analysts, more interns, more. I'm like, man, we're over 40 now. It's ridiculous.
40. That's a joke. That'd be smaller
Well,
now.
well, that was a while ago. I mean, but Chris, I mean, there's a scout team of guys in golf shirts.
You know what, though? The funny thing was that you could look at that card and probably name about 5 or 6 former head coaches. You knew who the guys were. I'm not sure I know many of the guys at Florida or any of the other SEC schools that are hired for the same positions just because Alabama has that many number of coaches.
Yeah. Spurrier didn't even know him. So it's just bizarre. And all right, listen, I know what your schedule is, Chris. If you can hang, fine. If you can't, I understand.
I got to eat dinner in a minute, buddy. I'm running late here, man.
Well, why don't you go eat dinner and David and I'll finish up. I want to get a spot in. I haven't got one in yet. I think it'd be a good idea to get at least one in and give you any final thoughts with David. And David, you and I'll come back. I want to talk to you about some things in the football schedule, the list of hardest schedules and easiest schedules and other things of sorts. Final thoughts, Chris?
Always fun to be on with you guys, and there's we're heading into that time of year where it feels like you're in the desert of college sports. But got media days coming up soon, and before we know it, we'll be kicking it off at the end of August. So look forward to being on with you guys a couple more times before that happens.
That'd be wonderful, Chris. Thank you for your time. We sure appreciate it. All right.
All right, see you guys. Take care, Dave.
Take care, Chris.
All right, a real treasure for us. I want to get in a couple of quick hits on this. I want to thank our sponsors tonight. We have a little shortened commercials. Meldon Law, of course, being the primary one. They do some wonderful things for the University of Florida and for other media. They've been our sponsor for several years. They talk about all the things they love about Gator sports and sometimes forget to mention they also have a law firm. So let's just say tonight we should remember Meldon Law does practice law. They have a new office open in Williston. They now have offices in Williston, Gainesville, Ocala, and Lake City. They want your business. Go online and check them out. By the way, they have some really cool things they give away on their Facebook page, like tons of tickets and shirts, etc. If you're not on it, go to their Facebook page, check out Meldon Law. They won't back down. And while I'm at it, I want to thank our good friends at TitanMRI.com who have a location right in North Central Florida. If you ever have a need for an MRI, there are people you want to know because they make the experience a good one. They want you, the customer, to have a good experience, and they go out of their way to make that possible. If you want some kind of a appointment that's not on a regular schedule that you could come to and get your MRI, they will custom make you an event or an evening or a weekend to fit your need. They also have special things for you there, like they want to make sure you're comfortable. They have special kinds of equipment. They're modern, so you don't get claustrophobia. And they also want you to know they take cash or card if you don't have insurance. So check them out. They're located in North Central Florida. And you'll be glad you did. TitanMRI.com. David, your overall thoughts. Well, there's so much to talk about. I'll let you pick your topics, but I wanted to say, I looked at the schedule, and you did too, easiest and hardest schedules. You know, of course, that out of the first 10, counting the new SEC teams, every team in the top 10 of the toughest schedule, according to FBI, is from the SEC.
9 of the 10, right. I think Georgia Tech came in at 9, but yes, 9 of the 10. And every SEC school was in the top 25 hardest schedules except Missouri. I got to be honest, I think there's a little bit of bias there from ESPN, who owns all of the SEC now. So they're, I think some of the schedules that they rank as hard as they do are a little overrated, but I do think what is legitimate is, I mean, we all know how brutal Florida's schedule is, but Georgia's schedule is very challenging. Alabama's schedule is very challenging. This has not always been the case. Okay, and it is the case this year. Texas's schedule is challenging. Not only who they have to play in the SEC, but they have a non-conference at Michigan. I mean, I I do think the SEC, however it's worked out this year, has scheduled far better than, the divisional lineup, with the weakness that has been the SEC East. It was more challenging for certain teams to have a difficult schedule. Like Georgia's schedule last year was embarrassing. This year they're graded out as the top 5 schedule in the country. All right, we'll see. But it's certainly challenging, obviously, who they have to play in the SEC, and also they have to play Clemson.
Yeah, that's true. Conversely, the easiest schedules came out as well. And none of the SEC teams listed first look are on that list. It makes sense if you have the hardest league and you have the hardest schedules and you play each other, that might happen. But there's not one single SEC team on the top 25 for easiest schedules, led by Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Rutgers, Kansas, UNC, etc. I don't know what that means, but I guess when you play hard in a hard league against hard teams, you have a hard schedule. By the way, there are a lot of teams that played hard schedules. When you're in Vanderbilt, you're all your schedule's always hard.
I do think some of it makes sense, though, buddy, in this case. I mean, if you just look at the teams that are in the Big 12, I mean, they're not the upper echelon of college football anymore. They're a power conference right now in name only. Don't know if they're going to have a preseason top 20 team in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So their conference games are not even considered overwhelmingly difficult right now. So you could see where a bunch of Big 12 teams would be on the list of easiest schedules. And yeah, there's a few Big 10 teams who in crossovers didn't necessarily get the toughest draw, like Rutgers. So, but what I was happy about as a fan is that Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, all on the list of top 20 toughest schedules. Now, we could think maybe ESPN's pushing a few agendas and what have you. Fine. But it's nice that the powerful, if you will, and the teams that we think are definitely going to be top 10, if not higher, are playing meaty schedules this year. I think that's cool because, like last year, buddy, I made the argument all year that if Georgia's not 13-0, they shouldn't play for the title. That the schedule was so easy that they were gonna go to Atlanta 12-0. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, they just were.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we have more balance now, I guess, right? Have you seen this, David? Maybe you have already seen. You probably have, but it's the stark reality of what we actually have now. Believe it or not, we got this.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't be a surprise if you've been paying attention
No, it's
to what
just
they've
the
been
reality
saying.
of seeing. The reality
Yep.
of seeing it is like, okay, it's here,
Well,
it's on, right?
no doubt. I believe the first 2 games on that first Saturday have been pawned off to Turner. Otherwise, everything else is ESPN/ABC.
Okay.
The first game of the first round Friday night is on the 4-letter network. Then the noon and 4:00 games are on Turner on Saturday. And then beginning with the Saturday night game, every playoff game the rest of the way will be on the 4-letter network. Now, in future years, I think they're selling off 1 or 2 quarterfinal games. But to start out, they're just selling off first round games.
So there it is from the 20th of December until January the 20th, 30 days of wall-to-wall college football. We've been asking for it. We've got the NFL Junior here. I hope it lives up. Any thoughts about it? I have 1 or 2 regarding what we might wind up getting because of the caliber of the competition and the head knocking that goes on in the SEC, especially. You wind up with a lot of teams maybe that were good that aren't so good with 3 or 4 players missing. We haven't thought about the residual impact of week after week. This is after the regular schedule. You've got this to face. So,
but I will say, buddy, everybody, because the only college football game that gets played on Saturday, December 14th is Army-Navy. So everybody except for the Friday night game are going to get 14 days to prepare for the first round game. Those two teams will get 13 days minimum, and we don't know if all of these teams are going to be playing in their conference title game. I mean, some teams are going to be playing their first game in 3 weeks, and that's the only thing that I'm throwing out there. Like, the NFL took exception to college football scheduling 3 playoff games on Saturday, December 21st, because that's their first Saturday where they start broadcasting games. And they warned college football. They said, don't take us on. And college football said, yeah, look at the calendar. We have no choice. Well, the NFL responded by taking games off NFL Network and putting them on networks, and by also
Friday night.
scheduling on that Saturday, the 21st, some of the most high-profile teams they have. I'm pretty sure Mahomes and the Chiefs are playing on the 21st, and Lamar and the Ravens also. So the NFL is giving college football the cold shoulder here, and I'm wondering, buddy, going forward, if Army-Navy Saturday is going to have to be used for the first round of the college football playoff, which is only the Saturday after conference championship games.
Right.
Because if you're ESPN and Turner, are you really wanting to go head to head with the NFL for viewers? Or can you just carve out your own Saturday? Because the NFL by law cannot air games until the third Saturday in December. It's actually a law that was passed in Congress. So if you're college football, are you going to take that exclusive Saturday away from Army Navy and have to say, guys, you could play at noon maybe, but we need the rest of the day to start playing some playoff games?
Yeah. Interesting to see it. Thought I was like that. Well, I'm hopeful. You're like me. We're college football addicts. We hope to get the best of the best, and we do have the NFL and the college football going head to head against each other. That's simple. You can make it. That's what's happening. So the competition for the entertainment dollar is there, and of course, everything's about the money these days. David, any final thoughts about how closely you followed the softball, baseball team, or even the baseball team at Clemson?
I was all over it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about Sully? About how this team came out of nowhere, the performances we saw, guys like Neely, and of course the MVP, which wasn't even playing 6 games ago.
Well, I think a few Gator fans were like, where has this been? We didn't see enough of this year. And also it makes the Gators getting one of the final at-large bids into the tournament look justified. And goodness knows we knew they had the talent. What I'm fascinated by, buddy, is all the ACC, SEC matchups that we've already had in the college baseball tournament. And now, of course, it's Florida against Clemson. And so I love this because, the ACC, feels obviously how they feel towards the SEC, and they think the SEC is getting too many bids, and the ACC is angry about, Alabama and Texas getting in at the expense of Florida State. And so, the ACC made a big deal about there were a lot of regions where the ACC team was a 1 seed and an SEC team was the 2. And the ACC did really well in those regions. And so this Clemson, Florida super regional is a big deal to the ACC. It is. They will pound their chests in the table if they beat the Gators and Clemson. And also think of what's on the line for Clemson here. Clemson wants to be in the SEC. So I'm fascinated by this super regional and, quite frankly, the Florida State Connecticut regional, because Connecticut's got 9 Division III transfers, seven of whom played in the regional and helped them win.
My goodness gracious.
Yes. So, I mean, you can get your transfers from D1. You can also get them from D2 and D3. And UConn used 9 D3 transfers for this year's team.
Well, that's what the system is. What the heck? If you can do it, it's all legal. Final thought: Nick Saban and Urban Meyer are now among the most notable names on the College Football Hall of Fame list. No doubt they'll go in.
Yes.
I got to ask the question this morning: What do I think Urban will go in as? I'm pretty sure he'll be a Gator because that's what he's told me. I'll always be a Gator. But your thoughts? I can't see anything stopping either one of those guys of going to Hall of Fame. Can you?
No, there shouldn't be. Absolutely shouldn't be. Also, what I find fascinating is two guys from the quote unquote North who made their bones really in the South. Okay. I mean, really,
Yeah.
they represent,
Yeah.
two guys who grew up in Big Ten country. All right. And then, are known for what
Yeah.
they did in the SEC.
True. That's
And
true.
so, and I'm glad they're going in together. They're the two best coaches of their
Yeah.
era.
Right.
Okay. And also, I think that they both changed college football.
Yeah.
Nick more than Urban, but Urban with that offense and doing it at Utah and then early on at Florida, he
Yeah.
changed college football. He helped change the SEC.
He did for sure. David, great stuff. Tell folks so you can hear your show in the mornings.
MillerandMoulton.com. And hopefully, if we can just, desperately trying to get in Gainesville.
We need
But
an
Miller and
NIL, we
Moulton.
need an NIL deal for you, David. We got to have an NIL to get you to
Actually,
Gainesville.
there's literally just one person that's stopping us from being in Gainesville, so we need to convince. And they had originally said they were excited about it, but anyway, MillerandMoulton.com and download our podcasts. And we do a 4-hour show, 6 to 10 a.m. weekdays.
It's a great job and one of the most knowledgeable guys on the air. David, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Buddy, all the best to you and your viewers.
David Moulton, he's the best. All right, folks, we'll say goodnight to you after we tell you about our other sponsor and one that's very important to us. Renstar Medical Research has been doing this for a long, long time. They do good stuff in the town as a patron, as a stakeholder in the community, and also they take care of our health. They're trying to find better medications for us to take, and they want the ones that appeal to us and actually are things that are indigenous to us in our area. So they have these trials, these clinical trials at Renstar in downtown Ocala, where you can go and take part. You may or may not be taking the placebo, but these are things that are pretty harmless. Doesn't cost you anything. You can take if you qualify. You can you got some investigational medications you can take. Maybe some kind of sometimes equipment that you can't get, and you may have quite an experience in doing this. You'll be helping all the rest of us because that information data goes to these biomedical companies, where then begin to work on things to do us in our indigenous area. So they're good people. They're friends of mine. They've been doing this. They've been the sponsor of this show. We're very grateful. Renstar Medical Research seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Again, thank you for Ali Peek Wilbur. Always pleasant to have her on and nice to talk to Chris Doering, the greatest walk-on in SEC history, and David Moulton. Have a great night, folks. We're back tomorrow night with the Orange and Blue Bloods. Come join us. Have some fun with us. Love having you on the show and listening. Thank you.